turn it over to our presenter. Let's hear it for Alfonso from Farm2Facts.
So my name is Alfonso Morales. I'm a professor of urban regional planning at the University of Madison. I've been a professor for about 25 years, and I want to begin by really saying thank you very much to Josh for dealing with so many problems and bringing me over here. I've been looking forward to coming to y'all for 6 months. What I've done as a professor, right now I'm 57 years old, and for 25 years I've been working in the social organization of informal economic activities, farmers markets, street vendors, and the regulation of those things, the economic impact of those things, the ethnic entrepreneurship aspects of those things, etc. 6 books, 100 articles. 50 years ago, $14 million in grants and contracts. 6 years ago, I said to myself, man, all that is, and $5 gets me a cup of coffee. What can I do to support the doctoral students that I advise and work with, junior faculty around the country? How can I support communities in actually doing the work? So, so I envisioned this thing, metrics and indicators for impact, and created my fight for farmers markets, and then rebranded it a year ago, Farm2Facts, and doing a similar platform for hospitals and clinics to enable local foods procurement, to not enable it, but to help hospitals understand the impacts of local food procurement. So as I said, most of my career I've consulted retail. What does that look like? Well, a farmer's market would come to me, Susie would come to me and she'd say, you know all this stuff about markets, we want to make our market more efficient. We want to make it more successful. How do we do that? So I would say, well, let's talk about this. And she'd say, how much will it cost? And I'd say, well, let me see, a student or two, a month of my summer salary, the indirect costs that the university charges, about $40,000. So she'd say, sure, and she, this has happened a number of times in my life. And we would do the work, and we would deliver the product, and they would say, this is fantastic, it's just 6 months too late. For us to make actionable decisions, it's 6 months too late. And furthermore, and particularly sad to me, the market was just the client. Professionally speaking, there wasn't development in that community organization. And as a scholar of community organizations, I want to see capacity building. I want to see professionalization. I want to see them offered and be able to take advantage of opportunities. So I worked with the Farmers Market Coalition, and I've been a fan of the Farmers Market Coalition for 10 years, supportive of their work, and I was a consultant to them, and we wrote a grant together and got a grant together to create this toolkit, which has an online software, front end and back end, that does data analysis. I'll tell you a little bit about that. And also data collection instructions. In effect, it makes the market manager and the board the principal investigators of their market. So instead of me being the principal investigator, they become the principal investigators. They get the opportunities to professionalize further. So that was sort of the impulse. The data gets aggregated so that assistant professors will be able to get promotion tenure. Policy can be made at different jurisdictional levels. It has a whole host of activities. So again, this is about decision-making and relationship building. Markets, believe it or not, are not popular everywhere. And they were very popular 100 years ago. In fact, the way most people got their food. I've written about this a lot. I'll send you the articles if you want to see it. But 120 years ago, cities in this country were concerned with what? Ethnicity, immigration, right? The prospects for employing underemployed people. And what did they do? They constituted marketplaces in order to enable all that. And so relationship building has been the sine qua non of markets from the get-go. Enabling decision-making, real time, is super important. So the toolkit, what it does is it helps communicate impacts of farmers markets using USDA metrics and other metrics. So the markets in Canada are very interested in craft alcohol sales at their markets. Yeah, craft alcohol. And they want differentiated. Right? So we're creating a metric for the folks we work with in Canada. Anyways, all of this was happening while I was a professor. mentoring students, teaching classes, serving the university, serving the community in various ways. And I was thinking, man, I cannot do this. I mean, it was my life was becoming imbalanced. You know, right? So I said, and fortunately, I was given a couple of awards for my general process, and I took those awards. I'm currently actually Vilas Distinguished Achievement Professor. And so I took that money and I'm paying a 0.6 staff person. So I've invested it into the platform. And I took the software through the university process that you all know generates all kinds of IP through WARF and creates all kinds of firms. However, there's not a firm that's like this, that's basically farmers market managers. These do not have a lot of money, right? This is not going to make people rich. So I went to WARF, and WARF said, okay, go play your sandbox. They released me. They released the IP. They said, you know, you're not gonna, you're about 3 zeros or 4 zeros too short for us, right? So I went to the discovery to product process, came to starting block, did the social impact entrepreneurship, just finished it 2 months ago. Doing the ongoing software development to the back end, including, for instance, making this metric for Canada and making a new inclusive farmers metric. And have a strategic partnership with another market service firm, MarketWorks, and getting ready to do a marketing campaign. How does this whole thing work? Well, again, if we're going to capacitate community, they need to determine their goals. So we help them select their metrics through vignettes that they have online that they can see how other markets have selected particular metrics to meet their goals. Then they collect data. The data uploads, and then they communicate those findings. So the key thing here is how then they can communicate those findings out to other folks. What relationships are they building? We work with them and we try and help them identify the relationships. Where is their, what's the marketing speak here? The pinch point? I'm learning a language, right? What is the problem that needs to be solved? Who must they convince, you know, and what must they need to convince them? So we are not doing this at a 0.95 or 99 confidence interval. So in other words, statistically, this is not peer-reviewed data results, right? But it's very reliable and validly collected data. We've tested it and tested it and tested it. So we know that the market managers can have very high level of confidence in what they're doing. So then what they do is once they get the data uploaded real time, they can download infographics and Tableau style graphics of the impacts of the market. So downtown South Milwaukee had those market sales with an average of those visitors per day. They can do this with 2 or 4 or 6 icons. They can change the icons. The graphics can display in a variety of ways, all to the purpose of helping them. And they also have access to different levels of interpretation. They have short interpretive statements and long interpretive statements. Again, written in a way that they can say with perfect confidence, this is what it means. Because that's, you know, a step in their professionalization, assisting them in getting that figured out. So, anything what was I going to say here? Oh yeah. So as I said, in this stage of my career, over the last several years, I've been thinking, well, what am I going to leave behind that capacitates community? So I envisioned a suite, right? The MiFi suite of products. Farmers markets is one. The second one that I've been developing is hospitals and clinics. Farm to hospital. And I have what's called an NIH ICTR award, Institute for Clinical and Translational Research. So that is to take the research findings of social scientists or other scientists and translate them into other contents. So for the last 3 years, I've been working with Upland Hills, a small rural hospital in Dykeville, and UW Hospital, and looking at what happens when they do local foods. What organizationally must they change? What are the roles and responsibilities? What's the org chart actually become when you start doing this? Because all of a sudden, UW Hospital went from 5 or 6 regular suppliers to 56 suppliers in 2017. $0 on local food in 2013, $2 million in 2018. $2 million bucks. Not insubstantial, about 20% of their budget. Same proportion in Upland Hills, by the way. So we wrote this award in order to develop some software. We're in the process of wireframing that software to help these folks understand how this works. Now, of course, the software for hospitals is very complicated because they have a lot of private firms they're working in, et cetera. I'm aware of that, but in any case, this is just indicative of the general impulse that I have going forward. So what are the next steps? Well, right now I have 4 grants under review to support Farm2Facts and hospitals and clinics, and I want to continue to expand Farm2Facts. We have this marketing campaign and whatnot. I have several asks of you. I'm a professor, right? I mean, my day job is professor, and I'm a professor of community economic development, of street markets, of regulatory aspects of these things. However, and I've done research, real life research with folks, and I know something about how they practice these things. But I'm not you. I'm not a professional like you. And I recognize that gap in my experience. I recognize it to the hilt, especially as I've gone through the various activities that I've described, D2P, et cetera, right? Touching 6 different offices at the university to get permission to do this. Right? So I need connections to capital. And I'm not sure how that looks for sure, but people have actually made donations to my research fund in order to advance this. It's just a tax-deductible research fund on campus. Might this be an investable thing? I'm not sure, because farmers markets can't be asked to pay a lot for a product like this. However, there are about 12,000 farmers markets in North America and Canada. We work with about 25, more or less. There's a big market there. We have a competitor that also does work with markets, but they also don't have, their product is not as good as ours. There's a long story there. Because our product, well, I'll tell you different things about our product, but lead generation is the language, right? I'm looking for ways to put my staff person to work in a profitable way. And I guess strategic thinking. 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, if I have to chair the department or maybe move into a dean's office or do something else like that, you know, at some point, my responsibilities to the scholarly community and to folks going forward, I want to make sure to leave this strong. When I leave the university, or whenever I have to transition to some role, I want to leave this in good shape with somebody. Because I do see how markets around the country have benefited from this. Quick parenthetical example I should have given you a little while ago. With these data, a farmer's market in Hernando, Mississippi identified the fact that aged folks in their neighborhood, in the city, weren't using their market. They weren't taking advantage of federal benefits that accrued to elderly folks. So they got together with their county area agency on aging and wrote a grant, got $50,000 to create a senior citizen transportation program. So markets are constantly under-resourced, but they can get ahead in the world using data where they know where it's coming from, they understand the purposes they're applying it to, and they see the opportunities to build relationships with that data. That's what's going on. But strategically thinking, like I said, I just want to make sure that folks have a good opportunity to use it, and that whoever follows me can use this platform and any other platforms that are in development and see that things go on. Open media, this is Warren, Rhode Island. We're subcontractors in Warren, Rhode Island. So again, I really appreciate your time, and I'd love to hear whatever questions you have. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Have you heard of REAP?
Of course, I work with
you work with them.
Yes. Thank you. And you know, this tool is works with 10 markets that the Farm Fresh food outlets network works with. I should point out that the data analysis can be pitched at both the individual market level and at the market organization level, so that Trezzy, I'm sorry about that, buddy. Trezzy. So that Trezzy, the market organization guy Trezzy, he can say, oh, okay, I'm going to compare Josh's market to Derek's market on this year or that year, right? We have very robust platforms built in Ruby. The backend is built in Ruby, and I don't know what I just said. I've got great students and folks at the university who do this, right? And Thank you for the question. Yes.
I'm curious if you could describe more about what the data collection experience is like. Like, who is the user? When are they doing that? Mechanically, how do they do it?
Sure, absolutely. This is a good question. Now, we want to distinguish between data collection, right, in the sense of observation, from data collection in a reliable and valid way, from data collection for scientific purposes. Okay, and we're going to focus in on the middle of those. Okay, because observation is observation. And our off-the-cuff observations are often accurate because of the experience we process, right? Scientific observation, of course, has a number of protocols that are, right, that you adhere to in order to generate data that are not only reliable and valid, but actually adjudicate between a question, adjudicate a theoretical question. So in this middle thing, we want the user, right, to be able to just advance their particular questions or understand their particular context better. So the tools need to be reliable and valid, but they also need to be usable. Having said that, then, there are three principal instruments that market managers use. One is the vendor application. We have a vendor application that we encourage markets to use that gets all kinds of data without anybody knowing that they're doing that. And it does it, again, with respect to expectations that USDA or NIH might have about food security, for instance, or other sorts of things. So that vendor application process. Then there's things that the market manager or volunteers might do 4 times a year. Visitor counts and visitor surveys. So we've determined that irrespective of the size of the market, if you do this 4 times a year, if you follow our instructions, at 20 minutes out of every hour, on these 2 days out of the year, 1 year at the beginning, 1 year at the end, and 2 of your choice, 1 on a big day, 1 on your choice, you're going to get reliable over time. And statistically, this would mean the standard error is reduced. So whenever you think about that, this is just so it's a longitudinal data collection process, right? Committing to longitudinal data gets you places that you otherwise would not have gotten to. And then the third part of it is, and that other daily collection thing would have to, the third part of it is daily collection in terms of programs. If you have programs, you do a count of the programs. When you're doing vendors, when you're measuring sales, you go around with a coffee cup or a Green Bay Packers helmet is popular in this state, as you might imagine. And everybody has an anonymous sales slip and they put it in there. Or if you're doing food security and electronic benefits transfer, you use the EBT machine and you download those data. And there's lots I could say about not only about the quality of that, but people say, well, what about anonymous sales? Well, what about reporting sales, with the IRS, et cetera? I know I was a vendor. I've written research articles about the ethics of tax evasion. I've been invited to IRS research conferences to speak about the ethics of tax evasion. Okay, so I understand the problem. What we do is we have standard sheets that the logos of the University of Wisconsin, legitimacy, right, the market, can be put on there. This is why we want to collect data. We want to enable decision making. We want to enable you to identify problems or solve them before you anticipate problems and solve them before they become problems. So now, of course, this does vary from market to market, but markets, it can take as little as a market manager might spend as little as 4 or 5 hours in a hard week, right? Or depending on the size of the market, they might have 3 or 4 volunteers doing things, right? And that's 18, 20 hours that's spread among 7 weeks. So part of it depends on the layout of the market. There's a variety of factors that I'm not explaining in full. But anyways, hopefully that gives you all a sense.
And just like a quick follow-up there, is that primarily a paper process that then turns into an online data entry process separately, or is it
both? It's both, because there's a lot of markets that don't have real-time access, and
sure,
you can code iPads to, but people just they're worried. They say, if I'm going to do this work, I want this data, So yeah, I believe you had your hand up.
So Susie back there actually had her hand up.
Susie.
Oh yeah, in talking about funding and grants, have you applied for a Compeer grant? Do you know about Compeer? COMPEER. They do. Okay, I'll share some information with you. I actually wrote a grant last year and
Please,
got it.
please.
So yeah, I'll share with you. It looks like you'd be eligible for a $10,000 grant.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you very much, Susan. Yes, sir.
So I was just curious about your MiFi for hospitals,
Sure.
what the software you guys are building is intended to do. Like, because you said it kind of like helps them understand the local sourcing process, but does it like help them order or like identify how they're going to do stuff like that?
No. In fact, you're in a tough space. There's several outfits that do what you do, right? Both public and private outfits. I can think of a collaborator who built a thing that works in Eastern Iowa that does a similar thing. And with Rhode Island, there's people who have. So there's a number of. But what this does is, so it's intended to help the APIs get written so that software from the POS data, for instance, gets ported into it, the analysis gets run, and then the hospital administrator can correlate their marketing efforts with the ongoing sales. So here at the hospital, our beta test of the data analysis shows, for instance, a pretty good correlation between changes in their marketing strategy and local foods purchases POS by retail consumers, with consequent health implications. New research that's coming out shows how local foods can contribute to individual health. And then, of course, the economic contribution uses that data, aggregates that data from the various procurement locations, and then provides instructions for how to do input-output analysis, which is basically an intersectoral way of, so the economy is built into 560 sectors, and there's software that enables you to assess the contribution of any other new contribution versus an impact to that outcome of interest. Let me try and say this a little differently. When you think about economic contribution or economic impact, those are not the same thing. Economic contribution is a substitution effect. So instead of buying groceries at the store, Whole Foods, I go down to Monroe. Economic impact represents new dollars in some fashion. Most of the time, those new dollars are from demographic increase, right? Birth, immigration, etc. But sometimes there's an innovation that introduces it, or some other sort of impact. It could be a new supplier contract or something, but it introduces that impact from, it's an external source. So we have all this procurement data, and right now we're just going to model it ourselves with Implan, and then try and then work backward from that to how the software would help people get the information they need to generate an understanding of the economic contribution that their procurement practices are making. Hopefully that's clear. Yes?
Can you give some examples of the types of data that you're collecting?
Sure. So sales, different kinds. Food security participation. So for instance, the Brown Deer Farmers Market north of Milwaukee, it's a impoverished neighborhood, impoverished community, and food insecure by and large. And so they were curious in how to incentivize their purchases from the market. And so they take the USDA SNAP program, food stamps, what we used to call food stamps, it's a supplemental nutrition program, and then they found local donors to double those dollars. So that if I went and I bought $5 worth of apples at the market, I could then buy $10 worth of apples at the market. And so we got the baseline data last year, and then we implemented a marketing campaign with them, not as part of Farm2Facts, but ancillary, actually supported by American Family. The grant was supported by American Family. And the administrative parts of the program. And so then we found out that so far in this season, it's tripled. The amount of money spent by food insecure people has tripled in the market, in part because of the incentive program. But that's good for the farmers, of course, that's good for the families. Now there's a substitution effect. but the numbers are pretty small, right? So the marginal impact on the local groceries is pretty small. Another kind of data would be vehicle miles traveled. Another kind of data would be how consumers get to the market. Another kind of data would be a metric. Another kind of data would be food production practices. The vendor application asks the vendors, how are you, what production practices are you pursuing? With that, we want to find out carbon sequestration. So different soils, different combination of soils and production practices sequester carbon at different rates. So we want to look into that a little more completely. And writing a grant with 2 colleagues on campus to do that one. Another 25 minutes, I can send you the list of metrics. What else do we have?
I guess the curiosity then, like if they know, hey, people drive an average of 16 miles,
Right.
like what do you do with that?
Well, so it depends on, I think part of it is up to them. So I can imagine a market in a city, in a dense urban environment, where there's 30 vendors and they're all driving 20 to 24-foot trucks. That the market can say to the city, well, these folks aren't coming a long ways, but they're producing these benefits. So the city might have some complaint for the market about something, and they can anticipate that complaint. That's not such a good example. Besides the Hernando example that I just spoke about, Hope and Main. Okay, so Hope and Main Market in Warren, Rhode Island, what they're doing, they're a food incubator and a farmers market. So they've incubated a couple hundred food businesses. And so what they want to do is they want to provide those food businesses further marketing opportunities. So they have them sell at the market. And so the market is not a typical farmers market. It's almost like a little grocery store because so many of the products are value added. Chili's ketchup. It's very good, actually. There's a host of value-added products already processed products. And so they use that data to market their service as a food incubator, that their businesses are going to have a ready-made source of retail opportunity. And then we're working with them on farm to hospital stuff to develop a way to scale up the relatively small activities in the incubator provides to start up a business to serve institutional clients. So most of the time, I don't know this for sure, okay? But I can imagine that some of the time, the data is part of a process, a variety of other decisions that will cascade. Some of the time, the data will enable a decision on that moment about something. In Athens, Ohio. Athens, Ohio, the market was on a strip mall in a private parking lot. The owners of the mall said, we don't want this market anymore. We're sure they're taking away the business. So then they instituted the visitor survey to find out how much money was being spent in neighboring businesses, and they found out that, hey, in fact, more folks were showing up in these businesses, spending more dollars than they otherwise suspected. Sorry. Yes, sir.
So, about a week ago, I was fortunate enough to visit MIT and visit one of the research labs on a topic of interest of mine. And it was very interesting research. And there were probably 20 of us that were invited as guests in the room. And at a couple of points, the question was raised, well, what do you make of this?
Sure.
And the professor, who's the director of the program, said, hey, we're in academics, we don't solve the problems, we just find the research. It's up to you guys to solve the problems. Which was kind of funny at the time, but it strikes me...
I'm not that kind of professor.
Well, yeah. But it strikes me that this is just a bubble short of solution for a buyer. In other words, if I'm my other thought, kind of parking lot thought, is I would try to make contacts at the Madison public market because I think they're going through some of you know, decision pains that you could probably help them with right now?
As well as another.
Yeah, I mean, so there are several, but it seems to me that what you're offering is just one bubble short of solution for somebody that's actually engaging. In other words, if I'm selling carrots at a stand in a market, I don't really want data. I want somebody to say, you know, we've studied businesses like you in areas like yours, and this is what, you know, they've done to grow their business 4 times. Here you go. Now that's something I can act on.
So, yeah, go ahead, finish your thought.
No, that's it. That's my whole. So I would maybe the challenge would be to take your very good research and flip the switch and turn that into some kind of solution, because people pay for solutions. You know, I want data, and maybe I'll pay for data, maybe I won't. But if you have a solution for my problems, I'll pay you for that, because now I can apply a return on investment, and it makes business sense to me.
So here's my response to that. This costs $250 a year for a market. To deploy this platform, it costs $250 a year for a market, and a market organization costs $500, and then $250 for each one. Now, what we say, when they sign into it, some administrative things happen with respect to the data, the security stuff and whatnot. But another thing that happens is that when they sign on, they've typically engaged us a little bit and said, we've got some other issues going on. So prior to this, Susie and I were just chatting, and they have been very intentional with that market, for how they organize that market, for the composition of the board. So in other words, they've done things, they've intuited, not necessarily intuited, their experience, the collective sense of the board and vendors is iterated towards an appropriate organizational model. I've found what she has found, I've found empirically, right, through the process. So we tell markets, this is pretty cheap. It's what they call a cost recovery program, right? So it's pretty cheap. But if you want a deeper dive, for more money, we can address a variety of problems that you might have that might either be implied by the data. Maybe you want more sophisticated economic analysis. Maybe you want more sophisticated understanding of the organizational environment that you're operating in, or the business environment that you're operating in. We can do that more. But, and this is, Kurt and I were talking about this earlier. From my perspective, this should be like his from you, you know? But I can't do that at the university. Even though the university is a nonprofit, I can't do that because even though I don't pay myself, honestly, I gotta pay other people, which is why I thought my own. So I think I get your point, and I'd be very happy to try and understand it more deeply and its implications. I really would, because I think it's important that I grasp this fully and explore the implications. Let me take one step back, though, to critique my friends in cloudy Boston. You know, I really think it's incumbent, and I've got several lectures that I've delivered that some of them are online, actually. Valencia, Spain a couple years ago, and here at the WID and other places, where I try and help myself understand how this nests in a much bigger picture of the last 100 years of food-related business activity in this country. The interlacing of technology, law, social organization, and economic circumstances that have given rise to what we have right now, and how it has been changing in the farmers market world here in Madison and in Berkeley, California, in 1968 and in 1972. Right? When those farmers markets began operating, giving rise to a whole new wave of farmers markets in the country. Small slice of that big pie. Let me tell you what, I'm in favor of connecting the large picture and the individual frame, or the frame from the movie to the movie. Yes, ma'am.
So that's actually all the time that we have because this is 9:30. So let's hear it for Alfonso. Alfonso, thank you for coming to sit. This is a little gift. To you, quick reminders before we let everybody go. One, we will not be here next week, so if you come, sorry.
I'll buy you
Two,
breakfast.
there you go. Alfonso will buy us all breakfast. That's what I just heard, right? Everybody heard that? It's recorded. Yeah, there's no take backs. Number two, make sure you grab the 1 Million Cups app and check in if you have not already. And finally, we do have that notebook that was left behind last week. So if anybody has any idea who it might belong to, make sure to come up and let us know. One more time, thank you for joining us this morning with 1 Million Cups. Have a great day.